For soldiers who benefited from education and preferential hiring policies, part and parcel of the GI Bill and Fair Deal, these advantages often came at the expense of their wives, sisters, and mothers. In the years following the war, women were expected to move from their wartime identity as heroic Rosie the Riveters back to traditional roles as wives at home. Lower income and minority women were forced back to the lower paying, limiting jobs they had held before the war. Many women resisted this trend, but employers, with support from the government, required most to leave lucrative jobs and abandon hard-earned skills. During the war, the percentage of married women and mothers entering the workforce had increased from 13.9% to 22.5% and 7.8% to 12.1% respectively. Wartime polls showed that between 60% and 80% of these women wanted to keep their jobs when the war ended. But when the war actually ended, women workers faced pressure from a new wave of government propaganda, encouraging them to hand their jobs back to men. The systemic removal of women from the industrial workforce was more than a practical response to the return of male vets. It became a Cold War imperative. Government Cold War propaganda stressed that American women could best fight the communist ideological menace by being homemakers. Comparisons between women's work in the Soviet Union and women's work in the U.S. became important points of differentiation for the two systems. The Soviets celebrated women workers as symbols of socialist equality. American politicians pointed to Soviet women workers as an example of the backward communist system that required all to slave away in service of the state. Images of well-dressed American housewives, surrounded by new appliances, became standard U.S. propaganda tools. Globally, the U.S. and USSR fought for the hearts and minds of developing world women through competing organizations. The UN-supported International Council for Women advocated for democracy and freedom for women and children. The Soviet-backed Women's International Democratic Federation supported nationalism and colonial independence in the fight against fascism and racial discrimination around the globe. In the international arena, the WIDF's pro-nationalist message had great appeal, while the ICW could point to the rising standard of living for women in America and U.S.-occupied Germany and Japan as evidence of the benefits of capitalism.